Welcome to Consented, a podcast by user-centrics that delves into the world of privacy-led marketing. Each episode, we bring you expert guests from our partner network to discuss the latest trends, strategies, and best practices to explore how you can grow your business while respecting your customers' privacy. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of Consented. Today, we're going to be talking about how you can make your cookie banner work for you and your customers. So basically, we're going to be looking at the banner from both sides. What do our customers see? And on the other side, what do businesses see? And today, I'm very excited to say that I have two wonderful guests joining me to talk about this topic. Firstly, we have Ed Cost from Cookie Info. Welcome, Ed. Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, hi, great to be here. Ed Cost, Cookie Info, working with Cookiebot since 2017 as one of your partners. And happy to be on this call with you.
Thank you, Ed. And our other guest today is Rebecca Balibacco, and she is a privacy engineer. Welcome, Rebecca. Super excited to have you here. Would you give the listeners a little bit of an introduction to yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm an independent consultant. You can learn more about me at privacyengineer.ch. Some time back, I did a PhD on user preferences around privacy. So that's largely what I'm going to be talking about today, representing that research.
Amazing. Really excited to hear more. So let's get into it. Okay, so as regulations are increasing around the globe, we are soon approaching a digital world where every single website is going to have a cookie banner, right? But let's get back to the start. So why do cookie banners actually exist? Ed, I think you can give us a little bit of a history lesson on this.
The cookie banners, I think they exist because, not particularly because of legislation, but I think the industry came up with something to see how website owners could ask consent in regard to placing cookies, because that's basically the important thing. If you run cookies on your website that are not really the necessary cookies, but cookies like statistical or marketing cookies, those are capable of course, of collecting personal information, or at least combining the information to personal information. And we had to come up with something, and that's, I think, how the cookie banner got into play. So in the past, it was just this notice somewhere on the screen where you could click accept. The cookie notices in the beginning, they just said, we use cookies, and yet only had one option, right? You just click OK. But that advanced towards, the cookie banners that we see nowadays, and where you have not only the option to, of course, accept the cookies, but to reject cookies. And even the more advanced banners have all these nice options to really set the cookies to your own preferred preferences. So, that's basically, I think, how we came here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we have kind of gone from a situation of it being a requirement. Okay, I've probably got to do this. But now most people, at least in the EU, we hope, they know they have to have a cookie banner. They probably have one. And we've gone to the stage where people are asking, okay, but is there a better way of doing this? Are there some best practices? How do I really help my users feel like that they can trust this banner and improve the experience that they have on our websites? Firstly, I would like to take a step back and look at it as from the perspective of a website visitor. What do they see? What do they understand? Rebecca, you mentioned that you have done research in this area, so I'm really interested to hear what you found.
Yeah, so one of the great things about studying this in academia is that you can really take the user's perspective. So a lot of our work was really trying to understand, what is the entire environment for people when they're approaching these notices? We were looking at all sorts of privacy notices, from mobile apps to cookie notices. And I think one thing to keep in mind is there's like this gigantic ecosystem. It's not just your own website. It's every other website that someone has encountered that's going to influence how they react to your cookie notice. If like 100 cookie notices before them annoyed them or they didn't understand it, they're just going to like assume they don't understand or like your cookie banner either. So it's sort of a tough thing for businesses, but you do have to sort of approach building any of your privacy notices with the understanding of sort of the user's entire life in this privacy sort of notice world and ecosystem. And so one thing that does happen is seemingly this privacy paradox where people say, if you ask them directly, they'll say like, yes, I absolutely want privacy. I don't want anything weird or invasive. But then they get a cookie notice or any kind of privacy notice and they might just click accept, accept, accept. Mm-hmm. So the privacy paradox means like why they're not really expressing their stated preferences. Why are they not doing what they said they wanted? And one of the reasons is like, well, we've kind of trained them not to, and which is unfortunate. So like, I think Ed's going to talk more about like what can individual businesses do. But I think coming with this sort of empathy for the user and understanding like they have their privacy preferences, it's hard for them in their day-to-day life to actually express it, you know, not just because of all the other notices they've seen and learned to sort of swipe away. Maybe they don't fully understand all the text or all the implications. It's a big ask for consumers. So I think the main things here are like, it's a tough ecosystem. There is a privacy paradox. And yeah, I guess those would be sort of the two things I would ask people to take away when they're thinking about their cookie banners.
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting. You know, something just popped into my head that I hadn't really considered before. But before we had privacy notices and cookie banners, something that we had a lot on the internet were pop-ups. And your instinct is really just to close it. So then how do we transition from like, I know this is now talking years ago, but like from just instinct to close pop-ups to actually like, oh, maybe I should read this and like see what people are doing with my data. But that also leads me to another point, which is something that Ed brought up earlier, which is what is actually a cookie banner or a consent banner and what is just a pop-up. And I think that users especially and potentially even businesses don't necessarily know what the difference is between having a notice that pops up on your website saying we use cookies and all the user can do is just like close it and they're being tracked with everything they do on your website. And the difference between an actual cookie or consent banner that pops up, but not only does it pop up, it actually blocks all of the tracking technologies from running before you make your choices of what you do and don't want to be tracked on, right? So these are not the same thing. And I would like to hear from your experience, do people actually know the difference? Like, especially businesses, right? Do they know when they have the right thing or not? Like, do we really know what we should be doing?
From my experience, a lot of businesses don't. Well, they know they need a cookie banner or a cookie bar or a cookie notice. There's lots of wordings for the same thing. But they're not quite aware of what the mechanism actually should do. In the past we had this pop-up, you clicked it, but now, even now, if a cookie banner is not implemented correctly, cookies still get loaded in the back of the website. So the prior consent part for cookies is very important. Up to the moment where a visitor hasn't made a choice, the cookies aren't allowed to be set. And that's something that a lot of website owners or bigger companies, they're not aware of that. And from our end, we deal with a lot of marketing people, and they don't really seem to bother. They just say, "Okay, thanks. We have this cookie notice on our site. We're compliant with legislation." But then you do the actual audit on the cookie banner, and they're like, "Oh, okay, we're doing something that apparently isn't allowed." So yeah, that's a big trick and a big issue, I think. Yep.
Yeah. And I think I'll add to that from the user perspective. The lab I was at, not me personally, but the lab I was at, did some studies where they had people, they showed them the cookie banners and it just had like a little X so you could close it. And so what does that X mean? Like, and they asked people, okay, you just closed it. Does that mean that you've accepted or not accepted the cookies? No. And there was just like this wild range of answers, which users don't know, but also like companies were doing different things. So it makes sense that they wouldn't know what it meant, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you kind of close it because what's your other option? You don't really know, right? So interesting. Yeah. Okay. So that's the difference between a cookie like pop up and a cookie banner, a consent banner. You're really supposed to stop any tracking, stop the cookies before anyone makes their choice. So let's say we now got into the point where, okay, we know what we're supposed to have. We're supposed to have a consent banner that stops the tracking. Is there a best practice or a best way that businesses can do this to improve the impact that their cookie banner has on their business? What exactly should businesses be checking? Are we looking at how many people are clicking, or like, for example, what Rebecca was saying, are they just closing it? What are the things that we should be, as businesses, looking for from the back of the cookie banner?
The question is for Rebecca or for me?
The question is for Ed. What are the things that we should be measuring, like as a business, right? What are the things that will show you whether you have successfully or unsuccessfully implemented your cookie banner?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, the thing, I mean, yeah, of course, I'm always looking at this from a marketing perspective. So, I mean, the cookie banners, we've seen that the requirements for them have been shaped towards a specific form. So, I mean, in the past, we just had the OK button, but now we have the OK, accept, and reject button, or the manage your options button. But I see a lot of marketeers thinking, I want to collect data. I want to collect data. I want everybody to click on that button. Of course, that's interesting, but I mean, from a qualified lead or prospect perspective, you can always catch those people later on. So if people don't accept your cookies when they first come on your website, they'll go through your website. If they think you have interesting content, you'll lead them to another page, a landing page perhaps. And on that landing page, if you put stuff in there that requires consent, for instance, an embedded video, the video will not play unless you've accepted marketing cookies, for instance. And that's for YouTube videos, for Vimeos, for Vistia, whatever. Every embedded content is related to marketing cookies. So if you work on it in that way, then you can get better data from your cookie banner. No?
So would you say that measuring the consent rate is not the most important thing you could be measuring for a cookie banner?
From my perspective, no. I mean, it says something, of course. I mean, you needed a target to work towards. So for the initial phase, I would look at consent data, of course. And then you can do some A/B testing, perhaps around the text that you put in your banner to see if things work better for you to get an earlier opt-in rate. But for all the other stuff, what I just mentioned, you can always get the more interested and qualified people in a later stadium. So, yeah.
Okay.
And I want to back Ed up with some research on that.
Great.
One of the studies I did was on mobile apps, and I had this. I mean, it was a few years ago. I had this pretty like basic game. It was just a quiz, and I asked people to sign up for the study, and then I randomly selected to give them privacy notices at different times, like either when they downloaded the app, when they first installed it, while they were partway in it, or while they were at the end. So all I changed was the timing of it. And then I came back to them 24 hours later and I was like, do you remember what was in that privacy notice? And I also had a condition where there was no privacy notice at all. And the people who had gotten the privacy notice...
But you still asked the question. Do you remember what was in the privacy?
I still asked the question and I asked them what was in it. And the people who saw the privacy notice at the beginning did just as poorly as the people who had seen no privacy notice at all. So basically, they were just guessing. But the people who saw the notice like partway through the app had a much better, like they actually seemed to have paid attention and seemed to have remembered it even 24 hours later. So, I mean, not overwhelmingly, but better than any of the other conditions. Mm-hmm. So not only is it probably better for your website to ask for that choice when they actually need to give it, but it's actually better for the user because they're more likely to understand, like, what is this website about? Who am I dealing with? Do I trust them? Like, you may have already built up more of a relationship with them.
Yeah.
That's such an interesting point. Yeah, it's like giving them a chance to trust you rather than just asking them or demanding for them to trust you immediately as they approach your website, giving them the context around, okay, we actually need you to accept this so that we can show you this content because otherwise these things will be tracked. So that's really important. I really like that you have the same answer from both point of views. And then I think this also ties into the next sort of question I want to ask is, what other things can we do to improve the user's experience when they interact with our banner? So the thing we've said now is showing it to them at a time that is more relevant, that they stop, look at it, read it, understand it. What else can we do? Anyone can jump in.
Go ahead.
Do you want to go first? Oh, I see. Okay. So I think the text on the cookie banner is really tricky. People have largely been trained that we're going to ask them things that they don't understand, right? Like, what do necessary cookies mean? Can your uncle explain that to you? Probably not. I always use the uncle test when it comes to sort of technology. What is a necessary cookie? I don't know. What is a marketing cookie? I don't know. So actually adding explanatory text to your cookie banner, you might think that would help, but sadly it doesn't because it seems like people don't even read it. So what do you do then? I don't know. Like, I think as an industry, we can all get better at these cookie banners and start helping people. Like, maybe we can give people time after time an experience that the cookie banner is something they can understand, and that's not there to trick them. I also personally am not a great fan of the cookie banners where if you go down a layer, they ask you to accept each partner individually. Because honestly, I don't know all 358 of your partners, and I have no way to make a decision about whether like Akamai is more deserving to set a cookie or, I mean, whoever else. So what is the goal of that? When you show someone hundreds and hundreds of partners and you're asking them to individually check them. I don't know. Do you have customers who like to do this? What are they trying to...
Yeah, you almost wonder if you're trying to confuse the person to not bother. I'm just putting that out there as my personal opinion. So do you think it's better if these things are categorized? Like, these are essential, these are marketing, these are statistical... like that?
Yeah, well,
go ahead.
There's two things in that. I mean, the banners where you see all these partners, those are banners run on publisher websites primarily. So they tend to work with advertising partners that they want to publish ads on their own site. So that's one of the parts of the answer. The other is, I mean, people just running a regular website, they do not run all those parties on their site. They just run their website. They want to do some statistical stuff. eventually do some marketing, of course. So they want to do tracking and tracing of people that visit their website. So you put on a Facebook pixel, for instance, or you do, if you're very involved into LinkedIn, you want to do the LinkedIn tracking pixel on your site as well. That's another approach towards the tracking part. So if you want to look at the text in the cookie banner, there's two layouts. So the people that are using all these advertising partners, that's typically a different kind of cookie banner than the ones that you see on, I don't know, the more regular websites. But then again, I think it also comes down to what kind of text do you put in there. So we've done some experimenting in the past that we used a little friendly approach, something as simple like, you like cookies, please accept them. Very cheesy, but we now see that people are more into formulating the text correctly, because they're also getting hammered by the people at legal. we get a lot of marketeers that say, yeah, we're not allowed to put up the text like that anymore because our legal people don't like it anymore. So they're starting to work together on how to formulate the best text in regard to the cookie banner. Yeah, that's an interesting development. So awareness is getting there. What we're putting in there to make it easier for the user to understand, I'm not sure if we're at the right point yet, but at least we're moving towards that direction.
One thing we saw with notices and mobile apps is that explaining the why was really helpful. So nowadays with an app, you often, like, if you need location tracking, right before it, the app will say like, hey, we need to know this to find the store closest to you, right? They give you the why. And they're like, and then you're going to see a notice. And so please click this, right? So they tell you why and they tell you what's happening. And then your smartphone OS kicks in and then shows the location permission notice. And that's a really different model than what we had at first, which was just like when you install the app, you had to decide whether to give location permission or not. Yeah. So it's not just the timing, but it was also explaining why. So like, if you're like, look, we're giving you free content and we also want to feed our families. So like, can you please accept cookies so we can be paid, is kind of explaining the why of it, right? And it gives me way more information than like, please accept the 358 partners, right? Or if it's just like, we want to make sure that we're giving you the best website possible. So we're kind of tracking where you click around. That's also telling me why, right? Like it's not even really who the partner is. It's sort of like, why? Why do you need this?
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're getting to a point where people have a bit more understanding, and the why is not like this completely outrageous thing that they don't really get. So I think it's really important to give people a real choice. It's not like a yes or no choice. It's I actually understand what I'm saying yes or no to. Okay. So another question for the two of you, and an interesting one, and I'm really, really excited to hear your answers. So
with that setup.
So something, Rebecca, you were saying a bit earlier was, what if we were designing the banners to every time somebody sees them, they understand what they are agreeing to. So what if we took this a step further and we made every single cookie banner exactly the same? So the user's experience is exactly the same. Everywhere they go, they read and they understand, and it's the same for every time they interact with the banner. Would that be better for humanity or our users? Or do we think it's better that companies can personalize their cookie banner to fit with their tone of voice, their branding? Perhaps they know a little more about the type of person who is on their website, how they think, how they experience things. So my question to you both is, do you think it's better to standardize in the future, or is it better to continue to be able to personalize cookie banners? Rebecca.
So I'll take the first swing at that. I think so there has been some research on standardized privacy notices. And in general, when a consumer is trying to choose between two options, having a standardized notice is better because they can just sort of like compare, what's in column A on this product to what's on column A to the other product. And so we can sort of use the analogy of nutrition labels. So here in Europe, there's the like A through E, and that just sort of gives you a quick view of how nutritious your food is. In the US, we have nutrition labels that also it's standardized. It breaks it down by how much like fat and calories and so much is in it. And so if I'm at the shelf choosing between two types of cereal, even if the brand of the cereal is totally different, I can look at the nutrition labels and compare them. Mm-hmm. So some people push back against us and they're like, well, it's not like people's health has gotten better since the nutrition label has been introduced. And I don't know what to say to that. But I think for instances where like you're really trying to compare between options, having really standardized privacy notices makes it so much easier for the user to get a sense of like which one's better, which one meets their preferences. They can choose like which of these, do they care about fat? Do they care about calories? Do they care about iron? I don't know. Like they can choose which one they care about and then choose their product based on that. So I think, and from there, you can kind of take it of like, are people choosing between two websites when they're looking at cookie banners? Maybe not. So like, what do you think?
No. I think we're at the point now where the cookie banner, in the past, we even had cookie walls. You had to click something before to get access onto the site. Now we are at the point where we have cookie banners that have developed into a direction where we actually start respecting a user choice. That is, if prior consent is configured correctly. So check that in your cookie banner setup, of course. So now we have these buttons saying, okay, I'll accept or I'll reject. But I think it goes back to the why question that you mentioned earlier as well. Why am I wanting this information from you? Well, it makes my website run better. It gives me an understanding of how it can help you better on my site as part of the analytics. And eventually, if you like what I have, I also can target you every now and then to give you a special offer. So I think from a marketing perspective, that's very important to keep in mind. And as I mentioned earlier, although people will not accept cookies from the start, they'll just click the reject button. No problem. You'll pick them up in the next level if you have content that really excites your visitor, and that's up to you as a marketeer. I always look from the marketing perspective, but so keep challenging your website. Your cookie banner now is part of your website. It's the first thing a new visitor sees on your website. So make it compelling for somebody to accept your cookies. Explain them why you want them. And yeah, that's the way forward. And I think personalizing is another option. You have general cookie banner text explaining stuff, but we've done also some experimenting with the text in the cookie banner on a certain landing page that we personalize that to get people anxious to accept the cookies. So we're running those experiments now. It's very, very promising. So I hope to tell you something about that in the near future.
Yeah,
I think. Sorry,
yeah, go, Rebecca.
Just to sort of agree with him and to build, like you mentioned earlier, not just to measure like opt-in rate or click-through rate, like you can optimize. Like I have definitely worked with people who try to optimize those click-through rates, and then they're trying to design their banner just to get 100% of people to click through. You don't want to do that, right? Like that's not going to help you. So I think I'm just trying to tie the what you measure. What you measure is what you're going to optimize for.
It's also very difficult. I mean, not everybody's going to click OK. I know marketeers want that data, but there's been other ingredients in the mix now as well. I mean, for instance, the beginning of this year, Google introduced their long-awaited consent mode, V2. Mm-hmm. So that really shook up a lot of websites because now, the website owner needs to be in compliant with the Google rules. But it also gives them an opportunity to work with data from another perspective, because Google is making it possible to do modulating on that data so that you get your analytics eventually. So there's a whole new world opened up. But that's a different topic. We're just now focusing on the cookie banner. But things like I want to optimize for the consent. Yes, it's a starting point, but it's just a starting point. You need the measures, but you'll get more and better results when you do some testing on that, but also understand that you have the option to pick people up on the next landing page, or if you do a social post, that you guide them to certain pages with embedded content. And that's, I think, a bigger win than just trying to optimize the initial consent.
I'd like to hear your opinion, both of you, just for my own interest. If we had our banners standardized like nutrition labels, right? Do you think that the overall global acceptance rate would go up or down, and why? I just want to know your thoughts.
Yeah, well, yep. I
think down.
Yeah, if based on what we've been saying, I think down, yeah.
I think down, and I think potentially why is when you see the same thing over and over. Rebecca, maybe you have some data on this, but when you see the exact same thing over and over again, do your eyes start to dismiss it? I wonder.
Yeah, so I think the this is not a policy notice study, but they definitely found that for nurses in hospitals where there's a lot of different machines beeping, and then they just learn to ignore the beeps. And then there's that one machine where that beep is really important. They really should pay attention to it, and they just don't hear it because there's so many other things that are beeping. So I think, you definitely, if everything sounds the same and looks the same, you're not really going to pay attention. No. And I think back in the days when we had these SSL certificate pop-ups, because you're talking about all those pop-ups on web browsers, you used to get a notice if something's wrong with the certificate of this website. It was really hard to get people to pay attention and make a decision that wasn't just I don't care, let me go through. They even had a study where they're trying to get people, force them to retype the name of the domain and really pay attention that everything was spelled right. And I think it is, if everything looks the same, people might stop paying attention to it, or they may just come in with sort of their pre-formed ideas of what they're okay with and what they're not. And so it might make it easier for them to express that.
Yeah. I think even throughout this this episode, we've kind of gone back and forth on it, because we also discussed that explaining why it's important, or what the benefits are, right, of opting in to cookies, how it actually improves your experience as a website user. But that is something personalized. I mean, there would be standards, right? Certain things that are standard, we do this so that we can use analytics, blah, blah, blah. But it could be very personalized per website. So anyway, interesting. We'll leave the topic open for now. Okay. Last question that I have for you two. And I want to take into context all of the things that we have spoken about, and especially that we do not feel that you should really focus on your consent rate, because this is not the most important thing. So with that in mind, if a company is looking to improve the user experience of their cookie or consent banner, so the experience that your user has, not improve the opt-in rate, right? That's not the goal we're going after. So improving the experience. So what are the 5 things, or you can give me 3, that companies should do? Rebecca?
So one thing you can definitely do, I'm a big fan of watching people use your website. If you're a big enough company, you can do like a real user study and bring some people in and like watch what happens and have them think aloud. You learn so much that you don't learn just counting their click rate. If you're a tiny company, like I've worked for startups, I've done user studies where it's just like I show this to 3 people and you already get a lot of information just sitting behind them and having them sort of react to the banner. And if you hear 2 people say, this makes me feel icky, but I'm going to click on it anyway, then you're like, I have to do something. So I think actually getting that sort of qualitative information, like, is this helping to build loyalty? Is this helping to build my brand? Is this helping to make my users feel like they can trust me? There's a lot of value in doing those user studies. There's also other things in the way you design the banner. And maybe I'll let Ed, you have stuff to say about that too, right? How the banner is designed.
Of course.
But I think we should at least mention, like, don't do what is commonly called dark patterns or don't do deceptive patterns, right? So don't have the pattern where someone goes in to manage their choices and you have an accept button, and that means actually undo all their choices and accept everything. Right. I've seen that on cookie banners.
I have not seen that. That is pretty wild. Yeah.
So it's like a big bright accept button and then a save button. Right. So if you don't read it carefully, you're supposed to understand that, like, by clicking accept, you are undoing what you actually you just went through the 358 choices. So don't do that. Like, don't just have a little X to close the banner without telling the user whether that means they accept the cookies or not, right? So those are both sort of like deceptive patterns that you should avoid. And you can look up dark patterns or deceptive patterns. You can Google it and there's information on it. And I think you have more on how to design it well. So,
how to design it well. I mean, for us, it's been a long journey. We're playing the game since 2017, always looking to challenge, of course, legislation, but keeping in the gray area. We don't want to go over the line. But yeah, of course, I mean, cookie banner design, it can definitely help your website. I mean, the why question, we've covered that, but from my experience, people like to see a banner that blends in with the site that they're seeing. So look at adding your own logo, your own colors, your CTA button colors, for instance. I mean, you can let that come back in your cookie button design. So there's all sorts of stuff that you can look at to make the cookie banner more appealing. I mean, we're stuck with it. They're going to pop up. You need to work with them. So, make the design look like you're entering a warm bath. It's a site you visit. Yeah, it's a site that you visit. So make it a warm welcome. Sorry, I will skip the bath, but make it a warm welcome for people to accept your cookies. I mean, it's and people not accepting cookies. Well, apparently they have a good reason for it. So
Okay.
Well, we didn't talk about language, but where possible, if you can guess what language your visitor speaks, use that language.
Yeah, well, I mean, the better consent management platforms out there support multiple languages. Not everybody sets them up because they think, well, I'm just based in the Netherlands or in Switzerland or whatever, and they put in their local language. But yeah, it can be interesting if you see in your analytics data that you're helping people from other countries, then why not make the banner appear in their language as well? I mean, it's in most systems, it's just a click of a button, and it makes it a lot easier to understand a Spanish website with a Spanish cookie notice instead of, maybe an English one. That would be helpful for me, for instance. I'm not that good in Spanish.
Okay, so I would summarize that our advice, or your advice, not mine, just relaying the message, would be test, see what your users are doing on your website, how they're reacting to things. I mean, there are really great user testing tools where you can even screen and voice record as users go through your experience. I think that's really interesting, and I also think, like, for many parts of your website, really important to do. Don't slip into dark patterns. So don't try and trick people into accepting cookies. We've already discussed that this shouldn't be your end goal with your cookie banner. Your end goal with your cookie banner should be informing users of what their choices are, what you need to use cookies for, how it benefits them, and then let them make their own choice at the end of the day. And designing a warm welcome, not a warm bath. So basically, having a banner that looks and feels like your website, that it's not some strange thing that pops up completely out of context and you wonder, like, what is this? So having something like really in line with the user journey, and then if possible, the appropriate languages of your website visitors so that they are understanding in their own language what they are agreeing to. I think that those are really great pieces of advice. Anything else pop into anyone's head while I was summarizing?
Now, just summary, sorry. I think you did it great.
Cool. Okay. Well, I think that that's all we have time for today. Thank you both so much. It was really interesting to hear your thoughts. I think that you agreed on more things that you disagreed on. And I'm not sure if you were both surprised by that, but I was, because I thought maybe the research from the customer side was going to clash a little bit with the business side. But I'm happy to hear and say that it seems like we are going into the same direction, giving users choice, respecting their choices, and also trying to help them understand what they are choosing at the same time. So thank you both for being here. Really appreciate it. I think that we have left our listeners with some great advice and great tips and things to look out for. And wishing you a wonderful day further. Thank you.